In this chapter, we're going to introduce futures and forwards contracts. For the most part, we're going to be talking about how you can use them to hedge your portfolios, but these can also be used for speculative purposes. So let me set the scene for how futures and forwards contracts developed. It is back in the day. You are a farmer and you are worried about planting your crop. Well, I have to till the fields, I have to plant, I have to weed, I have to water, I have to watch it grow, I have to do all of this work up front, but then I don't have any money coming in until I actually sell my wheat, right? So I'm worried that the cost of wheat will fall by the time I am ready to bring my crop to market, and that I won't be able to recoup enough to cover my costs. Flip side of that, you have the miller and the baker. Well, what are they worried about? The miller's the one who grinds the wheat to make the flour. The baker's the one who turns the flour into bread. They are both worried about the idea that there will not be enough wheat, right? That they won't be able to get their hands on it in order to make their flour or their bread. Or they're worried that the price would be so high that even if they are able to acquire it, it would be, the prices would be astronomical and no one would be willing to buy their bread. So you have these two sides of a coin, one who's worried about a price falling and one who's worried about a price rising, both of which are concerned because they do not know the future price. So these contracts were introduced to allow both sides to lock in a price, therefore eliminating that variability. Now, futures and forwards contracts are basically a right you lock in a price today for some future delivery. These are an obligation, not a right like options are. So if the market moves against you, this is a zero-sum game. There's a winner and there's a loser. If the market moves against you, you do lose money. You can't just walk away from the trade. And there are practices and policies put in place to ensure that that does not happen. These futures and forwards are traded on currencies, agricultural commodities, like the example we just discussed, interest rates, and equity indices. So let's show you how this works. The difference between futures and forwards. So all of these kinds of markets started out as forward agreements. Forward agreements are negotiated between two different sides. They can either result in a direct placement, which is one side, the farmer calls up the miller. That would be a direct placement, directly negotiated, or they can be negotiated through a clearinghouse. But no money changes hands until actual maturity, right? That was how all of this started in the beginning. Then as you had more farmers dealing with more millers, dealing with more bakers, and so on and so forth, things got streamlined and standardized into forwards contracts. Into futures contracts. So futures and forwards follow the same logic, except that the futures contracts are standardized based on size, quantity, quality, those kinds of things. And they offer more liquidity because they're mark-to-market daily to be traded on an exchange. So this mark-to-market daily means that both sides exchange the price variation, the gain or loss, on a daily basis. This provides the exchange with a little more backup and prevents either side from walking away. And the fact that you could get out of this early, since it's mark-to-market daily, you would be able to close your position on a daily basis, provides more liquidity to the market. So there's two types of positions you can enter into for a future. Panel A on this graph shows the long position. So with a long position, we have our profit on the vertical axis and the spot price on the horizontal axis. And this is your long position in a futures contract. So when you're entering into a long position, for the most part, what you're doing is you're saying, I want to ensure that I lock in the price now because I'm going to be worried about a price increasing in the future. The way that you profit based on the futures or a long position in a futures contract is the spot price minus the futures price. Now, with a short position, that's where you take the flip side of it. You need to sell something in the future and you're worried about the price potentially falling in the future. So your profit there is the futures price minus the spot price. So in both cases, you're locking in a position. It's just a question of which side you're betting on. With futures, we post an initial margin and a maintenance margin and then hand money changes hands on a daily basis as it's marked to market. I'll show you an example of that in a little bit when we discuss the mechanics of trading. The next video I want you to watch is an example of using a futures contract to hedge a position.